Okay, in this video, I'm going to be building off of the data that we've accumulated from the VLOOKUP function and showing you how to make it into a pivot table. And please excuse any sounds that you might hear coming through my computer. Those are just notifications that I have not been able to turn off. So right now we have added our current teachers to each student. We also are on one of the tabs that JT made that has the TDA scores on it too. And so what I'm going to show is how to use some of this data to make some bigger school-wide decisions around how to support with TDAs and really get some important baseline information about where your students are performing. So we are looking at my current sixth grade students. So these were fifth graders at our feeder schools last year. And the first thing that I like to do is to convert this TDA number into something that I can really manage and use in my pivot table. So I'm going to select column B right here, and I'm going to use a function called find and replace. So I went to edit, and I'm going to find and replace. And what I'm finding and replacing is whenever it says a 16 out of 16, I want to find, that's the score of the TDA right here. I want to replace that with a 4 because that means those are the number of students that scored a 4 on the TDA. And I'm actually going to do this across this sheet in this specific range. And so it's this fifth grade ELA sheet, range M. And I'm going to replace all. Okay. And so you'll see when I hit that button, it replaced over here, the 16 out of 16s for 4s. I'm going to now replace any 12 out of 16s with 3 in this specific range. I'm going to replace all. You'll notice that a lot of the 3s just changed over here. I'm going to do the same thing for 8s. I'm going to replace them with 2s. I'm going to replace all. And I'm going to do the same thing with 4 out of 16. I'm going to replace that with 1. And I'm going to hit replace all. And finally, I'm going to do 0 out of 16, replace with 0. And I'm going to replace all there. So what this has done is this has now had our TDA scores updated into something that we can really use for the next function that I'm going to show, which is how to use a pivot table. So what we're going to do now is we're going to, and I want to just do a quick tutorial on, especially in our school, we have students that cycle through sections. And so if I wanted to, for example, change this teacher's name into a section number, I can do that same function here. I can hit edit, find and replace, and then that teacher's name was Dana Kessler, and Dana's section is, hold on, Kessler, her section is 604. I'm going to replace her name with 604. And I'm going to hit replace all. Whoops, I might have not spelled something correctly here. Specific range, match case, replace all. Kessler. All right, sometimes if there's a space in there, you are having trouble. I'm having trouble doing the replace all for Dana. But you can eventually, another way to do this without doing the find and replace would be to filter for this teacher. And so we add a filter. This is how you add a filter up here. I'm going to clear, I'm going to find Dana's name right here. And I'm going to replace this with 604. So now I'm just going to drag and drop this down. And that's another way just to quickly change from a teacher's names to a section is to do it that way. Find and replace does work. I'm not sure why it's not working for me at that time. Okay, so I'm going to select all. I'm going to get all my teachers back here, and I'm going to show a way to use a pivot table. So a pivot table is a way of using data in a single sheet to demonstrate overall patterns and trends. And the way you do this is I'm on this current sheet. I'm going to go to Data Tool, and I'm going to select Pivot Table. Okay, and it says, do you want to create a new sheet? A new sheet means that we're going to create a sheet after 5th grade ELA that's using all this data for a pivot table. I'm going to hit Create, all right, and it's going to create a new pivot table down here, and this is where we can start to look at our data. And so, and over on this side, we have our rows, our values. I'm going to add a row, and I want the row to have current teacher on it. All right, when I click current teacher, notice it popped up all of our current teachers that are on this 5th grade ELA tab right here. So I just toggled back and forth between tabs. I'm still on pivot table 1. And then I can start to do some really neat things with the data. I can start to see what are the scores and an overall trend across the school and we're going to focus on TDAs. So now I'm just getting a count of all the numbers of students. Actually, this is a sum right now of the TDA scores. I'm going to change this from sum because it's now what it's doing is it's adding up all the TDA scores, which I don't want. I'm going to change a sum to count A. Okay. When I changed it to count A, it has a total count of the number of TDAs in that section. Not super useful information right now. But when I add another column for TDAs, I added a column that now has the score of the TDAs. And so I find this particularly useful because it gives me a snapshot of the numbers and what each student scored on that TDA in the section. So you'll notice here are the scores, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, here's the number of students in those sections that scored that number on their TDA. And so this is really useful information for me, and I'll tell you why. I notice now, looking at my 6th grade class, that 8 students scored a 4 on the TDA. 82 students scored a 3, 194 students scored a 2, and 101 students scored a 1. What this tells me is that most of our students in 6th grade right now coming to us are scoring 2s on their text-dependent analysis questions. So, and look, only 8 are scoring 4s. So what I'm now looking for is we have a common TDA each month, and I've noticed that our 6th grade teachers are awarding a lot of 4s, more than what the PSSA indicated that students actually received last year. And so that tells me there is a misalignment right now with how we're scoring a 4 on our common assessment versus how the PSSA scores it. And that could help me decide to make some interesting instructional choices for how I use my PLC time. So other ways to do this, I don't have to do this just by current teacher. So now that I have this table set up, I can change from current teacher to anything else. Maybe I want to now add a column for gender. I can see across the 6th grade how boys and girls did. Notice that this is interesting, of the 4s that were scored, 7 of those, there were 8, 7 were female. I could then also change this to, why don't we go to race? I can now break down and I can see which racial groups are scoring at a different level than others. And this might be important for schools if you're noticing there are opportunity gaps that exist in student writing amongst the different groups of students that you have. What's particularly useful for these pivot tables, and right now we're only on 6th grade, is to think about trends across grade levels too. And that can be done by doing the same practice of creating a pivot table on 6th grade ELA or 7th grade ELA too. But for my purposes, I think what's the most important for getting the snapshot is looking at current teacher. And maybe there are certain classrooms that there are a large number of, and I'm looking at this section right here, a large number of 2s that need to be pushed, and there are no 4s in this class section. Or interesting, in Mr. Pope's class right now, a lot of students are scored 1s on their TDA. And so this might be a section that we really focus on some more foundational writing skills. And so that's a pivot table. You can do a lot of different things with it. Big takeaways are make sure you change the values to account A, and then your rows are these are rows right here. Your columns are across the top, and you can manipulate the data to give you quick snapshots of what's going on. You could also, after you make your individual teacher trackers, you can do some pivot tables in there. So really useful tool. It can also think about like class breakdowns between race and gender, a quick way to start to get some more information about who your students are. Okay, that's it. Thanks so much.